Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, Editor-in-Chief at R&R, and today we're exploring the topic that is vital to success for any restoration company, the art and science of estimating. Estimating isn't just about the numbers, it's about accuracy, efficiency, and ensuring profitability in every project. Our special guests today are Kevin Mardegian and Tess Hughey with Elkmont Estimates. Kevin is the general manager at Elkmont and has been in the restoration industry since 2013, with a focus on large losses since 2015. With extensive experience working with two of the largest general contractors in the country, Kevin brings unique insights into managing complex projects and seeing them through to completion. Joining Kevin is Tess, a senior estimator at Elkmont, who brings a strong background in reconstruction and mitigation. As a former project manager, Tess knows how to write accurate estimates and ensure restorers are properly compensated. Her innovative approach is influenced by her time in the ag tech industry and helps her integrate technology to create the most profitable estimates for her clients. Please welcome Kevin and Tess.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Kayla. I appreciate that. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So I think we kind of said it, estimating is a huge topic and a huge part of any restoration business. So I wanted to kind of jump into the business operation side of estimating. So one thing that isn't really talked about, but I think is extremely crucial, is how do you properly onboard your homeowner prior to work commencing?
Tess, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah. Sure. Yep. So a couple of things that we do. Jeff Deem, our owner of Elkmont, always kind of compares this to like an insurance or a medical bill. So when you go to the doctor, if you have a deductible or whatever, you're always going to have like some sort of out-of-pocket costs. We kind of use that example to explain to our homeowners, like, hey, we're going to do the best we can to work with the insurance within their guidelines, but also, still having us make money according to the S500 and regulations and OSHA that we're supposed to follow. But we're going to tell you right now, insurance may or may not cover all of this. We're going to do the best we can to, get it covered, but we want you to know this is where we're at. And I think when you just have that super honest conversation with your clients, that they respect that. And it's better to do that up front than when you're done with the job, because it's like, oh, well, I didn't know this. And you're kind of backtracking. So it's really important to take that proactive approach rather than a reactive approach with your clients. And I think, in my experience, honesty is always the best policy. And so when working with onboarding a new client, that seems to really help. But also when we use and I'm sure Kevin will touch on this later, our full service option, which is a claims closing option within Elkmont, we actually do all of the rebuttals and we actually address all of the communication to the homeowner. So they know what's going on. And then when we get a rebuttal back from an adjuster saying, hey, we don't want to pay for PPE, or we don't want to pay for a service call, we can actually send them hard documentation from the S500, from OSHA, from handbooks, whatever it may be, saying, hey, these line items are justified and appropriate, and we should be getting paid for them. So I think when the homeowner also not only has that upfront chat, but then sees the data and the proof behind why we're charging what we're charging, they understand, like, hey, these people aren't messing around and this is important. And these are not fluff line items. This is accurate information and they're backing it up with real facts. So that's kind of how a long answer of how we onboard our clients and what I would recommend to our restorers.
In addition to that, just thinking about when you have a first conversation with a homeowner, when you're on site with them, I mean, this is their domain. This is where they stay half the time. So you have to be upfront and completely transparent with them, knowing that the insurance companies typically like to negotiate on the bills. So letting them know up front that you have this ability to go back and forth with the insurance carrier. It's not what the insurance carrier says. It's always what's best for the homeowner or the insured at the property. So letting them know that, you're there you're working for them. You're not working for the carrier. It's always a great policy to start off with the front end, just because you want them to know, like, hey, we care for your home. We're not looking out for the insurance carrier trying to save them money. We want your home to be restored back to the way it was, or your property, before this loss happened. So always being upfront that things like this happen on just about every single claim, and then we're here to help you guide through that process. At the end of the day, you're our client. We don't work for the insurance carrier. It's always a best approach when I've tried coaching our clients to how to onboard their customers properly.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a collective effort, like you just said, it's a team effort. I myself went through a water loss, and it was actually at a time where I was very familiar with the industry. I worked at IICRC at the time, honestly, and so I was very fortunate to understand most of the processes and procedures and know that the people coming in are there to help you get back to pre-loss condition, right? It's not about nickel and diming. It's about getting your environment back to what it was to. So I think that's extremely important. You not only emphasize that, but it brings the homeowner peace of mind. Honestly, they're stressed out depending on what kind of situation it is. And so kind of holding their hand through it all makes such a huge difference. And for them to see from beginning to end, it just really, like you said, it just brings ease. They're able to see the whys and the why nots. So you actually talked about this test, about referencing the standards. How important is it to utilize things like the standards, your documentation, and all the in between, the little things, quote unquote, that get lost? How do you account for all of that when you're crafting an estimate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have kind of what we call the Elkmont way here at Elkmont Estimates, and we have a standard operating procedure that we collect certain documentation from all of our clients. And so the key things are going to be photos. So we need, pre and some during and post demo photos would be awesome. We need scope notes, we need equipment information, and then anything else pertinent you think to the job. Some things that are kind of above and beyond that we really like and think are awesome would be like Encircle or DocuSketch or Matterport. Those are like your 3D walkthroughs of the home. And so what we do is I receive all that information through what we call our Elkmont portal. So the client would upload that to the portal. I would go through all the documentation, ask any questions I may have. But typically I'll say after our clients give us about 3 to 5 estimates, things are smooth sailing and pretty easy. We also need the sketch. I don't think I mentioned that, but so we'll need the sketch of the affected rooms as well. So I go through and I kind of start piecing things together. I look through the photos. I look through the equipment information. If there's PSA notes, I look through those as well. And I kind of, and my eye is trained to look for certain things in photographs that a lot of our clients forget. Like they'll say, hey, we removed 10 square feet of drywall, when really it was a 5-foot long 2-foot flood cut, which pays substantially more than just removing 10 square feet of drywall. Or they'll forget there's base shoe on top of the baseboard, or there's insulation behind the drywall. Just a multitude of things. So the combination of the documentation uploaded to our portal with all myself and the other estimators included expertise in this area really makes the estimates just shine. And they're ordered in a way that's easy to read, understand. It has a good flow. And so when we work with our clients, we just really coach them on document, get those photos, fill out tick sheets daily if you need to. We provide those if necessary. Send us, more information is better than not enough, because it really helps us to just elevate that estimate for the client.
Yeah, I think there's a point where some clients love to take, close-up photos of their moisture meters on the walls. Yeah. It's like we don't need all that. I mean, it's great to have the proof of it, but one photo is more than enough. So when I'm always coaching our new clients of being onboarded, I'm like, look, documentation is key. If you can't prove to me that you did it, then we won't be able to prove to the insurance carrier that you did it. So like if you're wearing PPE on a job, take a selfie, have your tech take a selfie wearing the N95 mask, showing the gloves, showing goggles on. If they're, doing any HEPA vacuuming, take pictures of that. The key things, that we have found for procedures to be able to write a good estimate or invoice to produce to the insurance carrier is documentation. So the better that we can provide it, I like to call it like a pop-up book to the insurance carrier. It's much easier to see in photos than it is to just look at a piece of paper through Xactimate the line items to know exactly what we're talking about. So if we can justify the means and the estimate or the invoice with a photo documented back, it is hard for the insurance company to say, well, no, we can't pay you for that because it didn't happen. So we always say the more photos, the better of substantial things. And full, clear photos of corner to corner rooms or whole rooms in general are much better than, 2 feet away from the wall where you can't see anything in substance. So those are some of the things we try to coach as far as documentation. When we're presenting stuff to the insurance carrier on your behalf, we do other key documents such as your dry logs or your moisture mapping, whatever that could look like. Plus, signed work authorizations. A lot of contractors don't get a signed work auth, which is insane to me at this point. In the day and age we're in, I mean, you need to have a signed piece of paper saying we're allowing you to talk to our carrier and also to be able to, have us legally work in your property. Even on top of that, a lot of contractors decide not to get a signed certificate of satisfaction at the end of a job, which is also something that most people should be doing on every single job because you want to know that you're done and the homeowner's satisfied. That's part of the onboarding process, but those are some of the definitely key documents that we need but most any contractor would need to present a proper estimate or invoice. So.
I was definitely going to say one of those things. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen.
Yep.
It's not just for you or the homeowner. It's for the claim itself, but also, it's important to be able to tell that story, right? We're telling a story through photos and documentation. Sometimes you don't get the opportunity to talk to somebody on the phone, right? So they're taking everything at face value, and documentation is always extremely important. Like you said, work authorization, dry logs. Sometimes people kind of overlook that depending on what's going on, how busy they are. Like we've got hurricane season going on right now. There's just all the things, right? Literally all the things. That's one of my favorite phrases is because it is all the things all the time.
Yeah.
So I think another key piece of operations to talk about is working with TPAs, right? That's a whole different layer of processes, procedures, and, most people don't really know what the pros and cons are. So what are the pros and cons of working with the TPA and how can it affect the way you structure your estimates?
Sure. So I think this is a good question for me because I have just direct experience with this. When I was a project manager for a reconstruction company in Omaha, Nebraska, all we did was TPA work through Alacrity and Contractor Connection. So that's all I knew. And so it's interesting. I would say the pros of working with the TPA is you don't have to go and search for the work, right? It comes to you, they feed it to you, but at the same time, the double-edged sword, right? So at the same time, you're agreeing to all of their pricing, their standards, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would say I probably lost out on average like 20 to 30% on every job because of the agreement I signed saying, I agree to your price list. I agree that we only are going to paint one coat corner to corner, or we're not going to do a service call or labor hours or whatever it may be. We were busy, but I think maybe the quality wasn't there for the work, the quantity was there. And so that's really interesting to kind of ponder and think, what would I rather do? Because going out and marketing and getting your own work is substantially harder. You know what I mean? And not that, people who work with TPAs are lazy, not that at all. It's just a different type of work. And that's what I did for many years. And now coming into this side of the industry, there's much more freedom with going out and marketing, getting your own work and charging what you need to charge and not chasing your tail, so to speak. You can negotiate with the insurance. You can use the documentation and S500 and handbooks like we discussed. And it's more of an open conversation and you have the freedom to do jobs correctly. No cutting corners, no this or that. you're able to take the time to train properly and make sure everyone's doing what they need to do to restore the loss to how it was in its prior state. So I think that's really important when thinking about how you want to run your business. I think that in this day and age, when we're all so busy already, it's important to focus on quality over quantity and work on getting those jobs that, you can onboard the client, you can onboard the insurance and get paid fairly for the work you have done.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. TPAs have their own pros. Again, the feeding the work is probably the biggest one, but as Tess was saying, it's like a pair of golden handcuffs. They keep you locked in where you can't necessarily charge for the work that you should be doing. So it's really difficult when you talk to contractors and they're like, well, we do 65% or 70% TPA work, and the simple question I ask back is why? Tell me why. And their normal response is, well, they keep the lights on. That's a great, it's a great thought process. Keeping the lights on is ideal. You have to pay your workers. So, I mean, getting in the regular work on a daily basis, yeah, it's fantastic. However, when we talk to us, like, yeah, you can start getting word of mouth clients the same way, doing that exact same job for probably 30% more. What do you think is more beneficial? Paying, contract connections, whatever fee or alacrity fee they require, and then not being able to charge for what your workers are doing to properly do the job. So it's a hard conversation to have, but it's certainly an eye-opening conversation. So again, and same with Tess. I mean, I came from a TPA background. That's all we did in the West Coast. It was all TPA work, and now coming to the other side, I'm like, I can't believe that we did that. It's shocking to me. So.
And I would also say another con on the TPA side is that every carrier has their own guidelines and standards.
Yes.
So when you're writing an estimate, you need to be well versed in what USAA wants versus Nationwide versus State Farm, and they all have their nuances. So sometimes when you're running 30, 40 projects at once and they're all different carriers, your mind feels like it's going to explode. So that's something to keep in mind. Whereas when you're not working with a TPA, here at Elkmont, we just have a standard of care and a standard of estimating that we do across the board because of the freedom we have without those golden handcuffs, as Kevin was stating. So,
and I think you guys said it perfectly there. It's quality over quantity. I mean, quantity over quality, essentially. And you know, sometimes it's really good to operate that way. Like you said, it keeps the lights on. I do think a lot of people who've been in the industry for a longer period of time, they do go from that 65% to, 40%, 20%. And eventually they just don't do any TPA work. And I think TPAs serve their purpose and they're great, but they do have cons, just like everything else in our industry, right? And you just have to, as a business owner, you have to balance them, right? What do you see? And I, you said Nebraska, right, Tess? And
yeah.
Kevin, you said West Coast. So, in your time in the industry, have you noticed maybe where TPA work is a little bit more saturated? So, like for our contractors on the West Coast, is it like fires? Is it constant, right? Whereas I know you have like your East Coast, they're always getting rain and all of that stuff. I'm sure that is a pretty constant type of work. I'm just curious. I think, it'd be cool to see if it does vary depending on where you are in the country.
I mean, so working for Elkmont now, we have clients all over, spread out all over the country. So we get to see the wide variety of, wintertime season losses versus, hurricane season losses, which, right now we're experiencing a pretty crazy one. So it's pretty crazy to see. So when I was working in the East Coast, so Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, and Michigan is where I now reside. So we see a lot of the wintertime losses. So pipes burst, we have the frozen pipes that go, or fires, or people not being the brightest and lighting, using extension cords on space heaters or putting blankets on top of space heaters, and all of a sudden your house catches on fire. So we experience a lot of that in my personal industry. But I mean, I can't imagine, on the West Coast, Earthquakes. That's a whole other side of the story that we don't really see a lot of because we just don't get a lot of insurance claims for them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely saturated where the seasons change so quickly, whether it be rain, storm, cold. I mean, they definitely, and the time it fluctuates. So when you're going through different seasons is when really you look at the different type of losses. And whether it be TPA work or non-TPA, it happens. I mean, toilets flood every day, houses catch fire every day. So it's really, and no matter where it is, it's going to happen. So.
I mean, mine was my water heater.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I think as a homeowner, a lot of people don't really think about it, right? Until it happens and you're like, oh, that's a problem. Thankfully my water heater was in my garage. So the extensive damage was not too bad, but like all the apartment complexes here and stuff like that, they usually have like a utility closet that's, with an interior wall that if something happens, there goes the entire apartment or condo. So, it's super interesting to hear, seasonal work and all of that. So I know we talked about the custom pricing and how with TPA it is a con, right? Because they have their own set of pricing. So I know at Elkmont, you guys utilize customized pricing in line items. So how does that create a more profitable and accurate estimate, not just for you guys in documenting the work that's done, but your clients?
Yeah. So what's interesting is using the software Xactimate, even within the guidelines and the user opening statement of Xactimate, it says this is a baseline of pricing for your area. It is meant to be tweaked. It is meant to be messed with for your market conditions, for like if you're in a hurricane and you need to hire temps and subs, all of those things change pricing. And so it's really important to be able to have that flexibility. And our guys do that. And we do that for our guys in a multitude of ways. We can create custom price lists for some of our clients. We factor for some of our clients, but it's important to know that, some of the line items for a certain zip code are great. Like drywall removal might be awesome in Charlotte, but it might be horrible in Ann Arbor. And so we are able to tweak those numbers so that it can accommodate what you're seeing as far as labor or extraction or equipment placement and runtime. It's all really important to kind of take that into account. And that's what's nice about Elkmont is we're kind of a boutique writing estimating firm and that we really get to know our clients. I work with 2 different sets of franchises and get to know their locations, what works for them, what doesn't work, and really cater their pricing, their line items, everything to what they need for their area and their specific business. And it's so interesting because now I've been working with some of them for a couple of years and the growth they've had financially and just even mentally within the business is really fun to watch. And so that kind of goes hand in hand with our price lists and what we're able to do for our clients and why price lists are so important when writing your invoices or your estimates.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well. So what Tess was saying in the licensing agreement that everybody signs to even use the estimating platform, it straight up says that the price lists that are produced on a monthly basis are not guaranteed. They're not warranted, and they're basically just to be used as a baseline. So there are lots of documentation floating around that basically say, hey, using Xactimate as a tool is phenomenal. Using their price lists when they could be lagged up to 120 days in most markets is not great. You can ask a restoration contractor that's been in the industry for 15 years, how much did it cost to put an air mover on there 15 years ago? And it's probably within 50 cents of what it is right now. You see equipment charges that are just completely underbilled across the country nonstop. I mean, you can go an easy market research you could do for your own company would be just going to your Sunbelt rental, your Home Depot tool rental area and just say, how much does it cost to rent an air scrubber? How much does it cost to rent an air mover? And then look at your cost process in Xactimate for your zip code on what it costs are there. And you can see right there, it's typically about 20% lower than what the other local companies are charging to do that exact same thing that you're doing. So your company is essentially a rental house for these equipment to drop off at a homeowner's house. And if Home Depot can charge $199 a day for an air scrubber, but when Xactimate only can tell you to charge $80 a day, there's something missing here. That one has always been a wide gap in what the pricing is. So we have coached our clients to figure out what their market conditions are needed and what they need to do in order to make a good business plan to make money for themselves. Because I mean, looking at it, labor costs are higher now. Equipment rentals are much higher than the Xactimate says. Material cost goes up every single month. Now that we have category, for hurricanes coming in and everything like that, costs of everything's going to start going up again. And Xactimate has over 400 different regions with 22,000 line items that are in the system. It is physically impossible for them to update that costing on a regular basis. So using your own custom pricing is not only what we recommend, it's what you should do as a restoration contractor to better suit your market. So
Yeah, I think you really hit that. Like, I keep going back to the instance where it happened to me. It was during COVID, of course. All the things that could have happened during COVID, and that's just what happened. It happened to me, unfortunately, and it actually held my claim up. To be completely honest, it it was a battle between pricing on the materials and I think you said it just right. It's extremely hard and impossible to update all 22,000 of those line items, let alone on a monthly basis, right? It's impossible. So we've been talking about, custom pricing and, really Xactimate's great, Symbolity's great, but they just can't keep up. So, along with custom pricing, I think goes into detail where we're talking about, how do you write a justifiable and profitable invoice? And how can we make sure, or how can you guys make sure that the restorers are making sure that their estimates are written to meet the standards, to have something that's presentable, profitable, and honestly just tells the story from start to finish.
Yeah. So I think one of the big things that obviously we're advocates here at Elkmont is to outsource that estimate or invoice writing. I remember as a project manager, I literally would run 30 to 40 jobs of all sizes at once and write those estimates and try and be negotiating with the carriers and tracking my crews and working with the homeowners. And as a PM or an owner or whatever you may do, you have a million tasks pulling you in a bunch of different directions. As a PM, sitting in front of the computer and writing an estimate and invoice was not the number one priority for me, and not necessarily the number one thing I enjoyed at that time. And then you get a million phone calls while you're trying to write it and lose your train of thought. So I think outsourcing is huge. And I think that when we do that, and I believe we have the numbers on this, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we started working with the original franchise that I'm kind of represent, we actually were increasing their invoices by about 20 to 25%. And so that's huge. Take that over a year's profit. I mean, on $1 million, that's $250,000 more. And our cost to do the estimating is a fraction of that. So everyone's a win-win. You're going to have happier project managers who are focusing on what they need to do, happier technicians who are getting the job done. And I think the second part of that into helping us to create a profitable invoice is just that documentation we refer to. Really, really get those photos, keep track of the equipment that's in there, get a good sketch. If you can, do a Matterport, those are amazing. So once you get that over to us, we'll kind of take the wheel and drive, so to speak. But also we like to tell our clients, like, not everything has to be filled out 100% perfectly. Like, we're really good at reading between the lines and seeing that gray area. And so, this is what we do every day. We know the line items you're going to miss. We know what notes we need to put in from the S500 into your estimate so that it gets approved quicker. And so I think that those two parts in combination with another, outsourcing and then proper documentation, will get you well on the way to a more profitable business, and then obviously profitable invoices.
Yeah, in addition, I mean, training at least one of your lead technicians, especially on the mitigation side, to be well versed in the S500. I mean, obviously, it's a lot of pages, it's a lot of information, but actually having them well versed on what the actual process looks like from start to finish, how to mitigate a job properly. So that, I mean, starting with training of your own and technicians and employees up front so they understand how to properly do a job. And then on top of it, like Tess was saying, document it well. So I mean, if they're starting off right on the mitigation side, training then plus documentation is going to set your company up for success. And then on the reconstruction side, I mean, the three of us could have a discussion on how to put your garage back together that was at part of the water loss, and we're going to have three different ideas on how to do it. Tess and I have the same manual on how to write a reconstruction estimate, but we're still going to have different opinions on how to do it. We come from different backgrounds in the construction industry, therefore different standards, and even different areas of the country have different ways to put things back. So it's all about understanding, the locality that you're in, training the employees to have the proper knowledge and how to do it, and then documenting everything well to present it. So
Yeah, I was definitely going to say, not only are there, industry standards, there's state laws, there's building code, there's all of these things that you have to account for. And those things go into creating a profitable and accurate estimate. So I know we've talked about estimating and invoicing. And I think one of the biggest questions that some people may have, truly is, what is the difference between an estimate and an invoice?
sure, I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So an invoice. So when you're doing a mitigation project, so this is work that you've been called out to, you are doing the project, you have completed everything, and you're sitting there to turn it in. This is work that has already been completed. The work has been serviced at the insured home. This is basically a cost incurred already. So therefore, it's an invoice. This is work that needs to be paid for because it's already completed. So we make a heavy distinction between an invoice and an estimate just for that simple purpose. An estimate is something that has not taken place to date. It's going to be taking place in the future. Therefore, we can negotiate on it back and forth, come up with a game plan, a scope of work, but something that if your technicians have been on site, they've done the work already, and then you're sitting there, you're billing for it, that is 100% an invoice because that work has already been cost incurred to your company and to the insured. So we like to coach our clients to tell them, like, if you're doing a mitigation project or a trauma or a bio or asbestos, anything that has work is already incurred, call it an invoice. No matter what it says on Xactimate, no matter what it says in your documentation, it is an invoice to the insurance carrier and to your homeowner. Just because they need to understand that this has already been done, we need to get paid for it. Things again, so if you're doing a reconstruction estimate, that's going to be taking place in the future. At that point, you can call it an estimate because the costs have not incurred. So that, to me, that's how the big distinction is. If it's already cost incurred, it's an invoice. If it's something to take place in the future, it'll be an estimate.
Yeah, I was going to say it's pretty much in the name too, right? I think, but people do transpose them fairly often. And I think, you're estimating, it's not done because it's an estimate, right? And an invoice is like anytime you go and you order something or you completed something, that's what you get as an invoice, right? And then it follows with a receipt. So I think, but it's just one of those things that's kind of like, well, which is which, because they do get transposed fairly often. But I like the way you broke it down too. Estimate is before, and invoice is after, and it's that simple. Doesn't matter what Xactimate says, doesn't matter what Symbility says.
Doesn't matter what the carrier says either. If it's an invoice, it's an invoice.
Right. And I think that's extremely important too, right? Because if you are in those exchanges of rebuttal and having to pivot and all of that stuff, you need to be able to stand your ground and say, like, no, it already took place, right? Not, oh, wait, let me look and see. If it's an invoice, that it's already taken place. And if it's an estimate, it's being worked on to go into, that phase of being worked on. And, all of this leads to what everybody loves the most, negotiations and collections, right? Just a love-hate relationship, I feel like. So I think oftentimes we hear this it's the cost of doing business phrase. It probably haunts most of us in our sleep, I would say. You know, how how do you, rebuttal that? Not even just argue, but just rebuttal, with your emotional intelligence and your supporting documentation, right? That's what you have all of that for. Um, yes, there is a cost of doing business, but this is far greater than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I like to say it. So when you're doing you're like at a mitigation company, right? So if you have a part in your invoice that says your emergency service call, that's probably one of the biggest one that calls a cost of doing business. Like you're a mitigation company, you should be going out there and doing it anyways. Just so why would we pay for that? In most insurance policies, it states that if it's a covered loss, all things that are exclusive to that job should be paid by the carrier. So therefore, there is no such thing as a cost of doing business. If I had to allocate my technicians to go from one job site to their house to immediately respond to it and look at the project, that's not a cost of doing business. I have to make sure those techs have to go from there to here to go do that job. It's an administrative charge. Or using, like thermal imaging or, third party sketches there. Those are most of the things that come back and say this is the cost of doing business because you are a mitigation company. It's like, well, no, they're direct costs to this project. If it wasn't for this project coming in, these costs would not have incurred. So therefore, there is no, in my opinion, such thing as a cost of doing business. And part of the negotiation tactics that we have with insurance carriers when we're talking to them is simply asking, can you please explain to me what you mean by the cost of doing business? And most of the adjusters that you're dealing with, or the desk level adjuster, they're not going to have an answer for you other than, well, the carrier says we can't approve for this. And so if you take that up the chain of command to their supervisor and ask them the same question, what does your adjuster mean by the cost of doing business? They will be like, I have no idea what they're talking about. Because there's nothing in a written policy that excludes things called the cost of doing business. And if it's not written in the policy exclusively that they don't pay for it, they shouldn't have a complaint about it. So
Yeah.
We're part of the Restoration Insurance Association. They have a lot of position papers out there about the cost of doing business, which we use as documentation that explains like all costs that are covered losses must be paid by the carrier unless a written exclusion is written in their policy, which I would say 90% of the time there isn't. So, but it's funny that you have those conversations. But yes, I personally believe there's no such thing as the cost of doing business. So,
yeah, I was definitely going to say too that, like, especially when you're dealing with even commercial, but more so residential, like those policies are so long. Like and it's no shame in their game. They're doing their job when they're saying, hey, it's the cost of doing business. But at the same time, it's like, as the homeowner, if they were doing this on their own, going to look through 97 pages of policy to see if there's a cost of doing business line item in their policy. No, they're going to say, okay, so I think it's, industry experts like yourselves, and our franchises that have to know things like that and be part of associations and groups that talk about this type of stuff, because it's extremely important and it allows you to effectively, argue your estimate, your invoices, excuse me, because it doesn't exist, right? And it's like at that point, well, when you go up the chain of command, like you just said, you can't really argue it because it's not there. And going back to the vehicle thing, right? When you're pulling people off of another job to go to this emergency call, it's actually a loss for that other job, right? So you're just not supposed to account for that loss, to go to this emergency call. So I think there's a lot of gray area and you covered it extremely well. It's extremely important to understand that, the cost of doing business is not in a policy. You know what I mean? It's that's what the policy is for, to cover the loss itself and anything that surrounds it, right? I think you brought this up and you talked about, if you're talking to the adjuster and then you have to go up the chain of command, there's levels to this, right? And so through your time in the industry, have you noticed any changes or willingness with your exchanges with adjusters and having more proactive and productive conversations and being able to give feedback? Has it changed over the years, or is it still kind of, there's the stigma, or there was a stigma, like you're just you're hitting a wall every time. When you pick up that phone or you write an email, you know you're going to hit a wall. Have you seen it change a little bit in your guys' time in the industry?
Yeah, for
Dramatically.
sure. Yeah, I would say.
Even
Okay.
carriers that were amazing to work with even 5 short years ago have become way more difficult. I won't name any names because that's not very nice. But there are carriers out there that have changed their tone about how they even respond to restoration
Mm-hmm.
contractors.
Mm-hmm.
Working on, since we do full service for everybody or a lot of clients now, we get to see this firsthand experience on how the communication has changed even in the last 6 months. Carriers are now waiting to the state required time to respond to a contractor. Not every state is the same. Some are 20 days, some are 30 days, but it is normally right at that mark of that state requirement for that insurance carrier to respond to a covered loss. They wait until the last minute to even start negotiations. So instead of 5, 6, 7 years ago, you turn in a TPA job or whatever it is, and within 2 to 3 days you have some sort of approval or communication. We have now found that it's taking upwards of 20 to 30 days to even start a dialogue with the carrier. Also, being on hold for 30 minutes with their automated telling system, basically to get to speak to somebody, has been delayed a lot. We have found some carriers that are 20-minute phone calls just to even talk to somebody or get to their voicemail. So it's a lot has shifted from being more personal communication where you can just pick up the local adjuster that you used to work with every single day and say, hey, Mr. Adjuster, I just saw you on the job site last week, so let's talk about it, to now it's the desk adjusters that aren't on site every single day. They've got 700 claims on their plate and they don't have time to answer every single phone
Right.
call. So we have definitely noticed that the shift from personal communication, building that relationship with the adjuster, to a desk adjuster sitting behind the scenes, not even in the same state, has definitely shifted to make it more difficult on a restoration contractor, because you can't just say, well, why don't you come over and meet me at the job site? I can
Mm-hmm.
show you what I'm talking about. Instead, no, we need 77 different photos of 16 different angles just to see what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So we have definitely found that over the last, year, it has definitely changed where they're becoming a little more combative when it comes back to negotiating, which is fine. We are in the industry to help educate and explain and justify invoices. We're not in the business to have matches or fights over these things. We're professional. We like to explain the cost. It's like the cost of doing business. Here's a document that's been peer reviewed by a bunch of different contractors, a bunch of different associations, and take a look at this and please tell me what you think it is, as opposed to, well, there's no such thing as the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
So we want to be professional and educating to the fact that, like, not every single adjuster that you're working with now has been in the industry for as long as we have.
Yeah.
And it's hard because when I first started, every single adjuster I work with locally has been in the industry for 20, 30 years. They have since retired, and now you've got younger generation of adjusters who are 1 to 2 years green in the system, and they just haven't seen everything that we've been through as a restoration industry. Which is not saying that new adjusters aren't great, because some of them are, but some of them just are just simply green. So we're here to educate, and that's what I think has been the
Yeah.
hardest part, is like teaching while trying to negotiate and justify an invoice. So
I would agree with that. And just to add a little bit to that, I think there's a lot more turnover in the industry. There's
yes.
not, the relationships in the past that you're able to make and call up your adjuster who's local. Things are getting much more remote. I'll never forget, I had to explain to an adjuster why in Nebraska we needed ice and water shield on a roof. They didn't understand. So not only are you getting more turnover with these adjusters, but they're not local and they're not understanding what's going on in your area. And so I think another part is that a lot of these carriers are outsourcing their reviews to third-party reviewers, where that reviewer's job and how they get paid literally comes directly from how much they can cut the invoice. And so, of course, they are going to be very motivated and finding line items, finding little things to pick at or take away, or the cost of business or whatever it may be. And so that gets really hard as well because now you are working with the middleman when technically your client is the homeowner. It's not this middleman. It's not even necessarily the insurance company. You're trying to work and do your best for that homeowner. And I think that's why it's super beneficial to work with Elkmont is that we have the time and the knowledge to sit on that phone call for 20 minutes to educate the green adjuster on what's going on, to send over the documentation from the S500. That's our job. And when you are an owner or a tech or a project manager, whatever your title is, you have a lot more going on than that and that your mind can handle. It is a full-time job doing what we do. And so I would say it's definitely worth the investment to get someone who's going to stand up for you on your side and use the proper resources to do so.
Yeah, I would definitely say too, you nailed it. Like the time, right? That you guys free up. Like, when you're a business owner or even a project manager, there's other jobs. You have customers that you have to take care of. Right now, with fires, hurricanes, all of the above, you're being dispatched out everywhere. Do you have time at the end of your 8-hour day to try and play catch up? No, you don't, because then there's no work-life balance, right? It's a nasty cycle. I think you guys both said it best that educating at the end of the day, regardless of resistance or regardless of the time it takes to get a hold of somebody, when you're educating and showing, it just makes the world of difference. And I think that secretly does build some type of rapport, some type of relationship, and you also leave an impact on the other person on the phone, on the email, and they're able to probably learn and take from that and actually move their claims along a little bit faster, right? Now that they have some knowledge under their belt. Have you noticed even in the last year, it's been a little hard. Have you noticed, just from the beginning of time that you started to now, when you are educating and you are talking to each other like we're people, how has that affected the relationships that you do have with, insurances and adjusters?
So I will say in my personal experience, my dad always has a saying that an education always costs. And whether that's it costs you time, it costs you money, it costs you gray hairs. It always costs. But what's nice about Elkmont is we're able to decrease that cost and that time and that money, whatever it may be, by educating our clients and, on the claims closing side, adjusters, things like that. But I will say with working with my clients for the last 2 years, it is so incredible how empowering the education and the information we give to them is. I have clients who, when I worked with them, were so meek and so shy and so worried to talk to an adjuster and rebuttal back and say anything that they would slash their invoices in half just to not have to deal with it. But now working with Elkmont, they feel strongly in what they do. They are passionate about how they complete their work, and how they do that to the standard of or beyond of the S500 or whatever reconstruction building codes and such that they're working with. So for me on the estimating side, that is really awesome to see, the kind of evolution of a client going from scared, meek, and mild to, not rude or anything, but just very strong in what they do and passionate and know what they can and cannot charge for. And, will kind of rally for that on behalf of themselves and the homeowner. So that's kind of what I've seen. What have you seen on the claims closing side, Kevin?
Yeah, so we've definitely got a name out there with adjusters, and especially in the third party review companies. They will email us and say, "Oh, we're working with you again." And I'm not sure what the tone is, whether that be a good tone or a bad. But most of the time, I mean, we do have a recognizable name when it comes to negotiations because they know up front that we are going to stand our ground. A lot of the industry, as Tess was saying, is they're simply scared of a bad review, scared of a Google review that's going to say they charge a little bit more than one of the big green companies off down the street, or the insurance carrier is going to say, well, they do a little bit more than everybody else. They're scared of what they could possibly have future impacts. We have found that clients that simply just stand their ground and do the job the way they're supposed to with this standard industry of care by the IRCRC, the S500, and they basically say, look, I really don't care what the insurance company says. We did this to a standard. We are charging for the standard that we've done, and we are documenting it so you can see exactly why we're doing it and why we charge for it. And they just stand their ground. And those companies typically succeed, that they are able to, stand up straight and be like, look, I know what I did is correct. We followed standards. We did it the proper way. We are taking care of the insured, whether it be at the insurance carrier's detriment or not. We did it because we were supposed to do it. And it's very empowering to see that with our clients, that you're just basically able to not just give away half their estimate or invoice just because the insurance carrier said we're not paying for it. So it's definitely something that we've learned over the last year. So
yeah, I would definitely say if you're getting those responses, whether the tone is good or bad, like, oh, we're working with you again, I think you're also teaching that side of the industry, right? Those who are adjusters that may be green or what have you, like, what you're talking about. I think that goes back to education, training, and understanding, being in the industry for a long time. If they already know what is going to happen, they can come with their thinking cap on and say, hey, maybe it's a negotiation. We'll still keep that, but maybe it's hours of difference. Or I know, Tess, you talked about ice and water shield, especially on the roofing side. I've been on that side of the industry, and it's crazy how many people don't know about that, especially if you have somebody like on the West Coast, right? If you have somebody that's on the West Coast, they're like, what the heck is ice and water shield? Like I'm in Las Vegas. Ice and water shield, somebody here would probably be like, yeah, probably not. But I think it's extremely important that, when you grow that confidence, whether it's you or with your clients or even the adjusters, right? If they already know that what is going on and what the work is justifiable, it probably makes their job a lot easier too. Makes your job easier too when they're like, hey, I already know. Let's just talk about it, and whatever, it's not going to be a lot of resistance or pushback. And I think that's really cool. It takes time. Even if times are met with resistance right now, the time that you do have, you're making it count. And I think, that's the most important thing. Like you said, everything costs, but if you're using the time wisely, then it all works itself out. So talking about costs, I think this leads me into, cash flow and the importance of it. I know a lot of us are seeing collections just become crazy. It's just like, it's a crazy time right now for collections. And, how can somebody still improve their cash flow without sacrificing their revenue?
That's a great question. Being on the side that we're doing a lot of not necessarily collecting, but negotiating on the insurance carrier or on the contractor's behalf of the insurance carrier, we try our hardest to help explain to the contractors, like, well, look, it may take an extra 10 to 15 days to get this at a better profit margin for you. So give us time. And we know that this is a very cash poor business. A lot of clients are extending themselves to the brink of, bankruptcy just to be able to keep the doors open. And we understand that. And it's a very scary thing for a business owner to be like, I don't have enough money right now to pay my techs. How am I supposed to, just settle on the job? So that it's a very hard balance to figure out exactly where that sweet spot is, whether it be you go like, okay, insurance carrier is offering us A and we are at C. Let's meet somewhere at B and get this thing closed as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, we can't make that business decision for you or the contractors, correct? So we want to have that open discussion, which is why when Tess said we're a very boutique kind of niche where we get to have a good relationship with the clients. We get to, have them sit up on our couch and complain about what's going on in their industry half the time. And it's just getting to know these folks in the industry And if they come back and say, I need cash now, what can I do? We can escalate that up further to say, okay, we're going to take a loss at 20% of this invoice just to get you cash now, which we don't want to do. We want to make you get paid for everything that you deserve to get paid in the industry. So it's really hard. I wish that there was a magic bullet to tell you that, like, hey, do this and you're going to succeed every single time. There isn't. It's changing. It's a very fluid industry, especially in the collection side. But the biggest piece of advice I can give every single client we onboard and talk to is be patient. Yeah. If you can just be patient, you can get your invoices paid and stand your ground. And that is hard. It is really hard. I've been on the side waiting, 6 months for a payment on a reconstruction job just because, of delays that happen that are outside of my control. And that 6 months is a lot of time to wait for a job. But at the end of the day, it's like, you're going to get paid. And I wish there was a way I could get you paid faster, but we're at the mercy of the insurance company. And like I said earlier, they're delaying the tactics. They're delaying the way that they're talking to adjusters. So it's really hard. You can start calling from day one and then calling the supervisor on day two, but that's the only thing it's going to do is make the insurance carrier mad, which then delays the project further. So there is
I was about to say, already a bad taste day two. This is going to be a long process.
Exactly. So we try to be professional, be courteous, and be patient. That's all you can do. You call it any service industry, any customer service, and if you're angry and yelling at them from the get-go, they're not going to want to help you. But if you have a smile on your face, you're talking to them, you're actually being a good person to them on the phone, they're more likely to help you. So which is why, we don't want to be keyboard warriors or angry phone call solicitors on the collection side, but it's be patient and be courteous because they're having a day just like you are. You never know. They could have gotten off the phone to the last 17 times with customers yelling at them. If you're just that signy face, that might be even take you 10 steps further than just, calling up and being angry at them for not getting paid yet. So
yeah, I would agree with that. If I've learned anything in this industry, it's feast or famine.
Yes.
And the feast will always come. And so, with that being said, just even a few weeks ago, I think Kevin and I were talking, I was like, oh man, I feel kind of slow. I'm getting a little nervous. And literally 3 days later, bam, slammed. And so it always comes, hold tight. I know it's nerve wracking. I grew up, my dad owned a Service Master for 30 plus years. So I know the mental toll it takes on someone as a business owner and their family and everything. But it does come around, and Elkmont does the best they can to get you every penny, but we'll work with you in a unique circumstances as well.
Yeah, I think you guys both said it best, right? With collections, it's sometimes you don't see. You're just like, oh, it's like dragging, you don't see like that silver lining at the very end. You don't see that finish line. But, I think this also goes to some franchises and restoration businesses and even cleaners. They'll offer other services to keep that cash flow coming in, right? And I think that's the beauty of our industry. There are restoration projects that people are just going to pay cash. They don't want to deal with insurance. Maybe they don't have insurance. And so you still have that side of your business, but when it comes to, like you both touched on, if you need it now, there is an opportunity to, if you're at A, and the adjuster's like, hey, no, I'm at C, this isn't going to happen. If you have to come to B, then that's what it is. But ultimately, you guys are fighting for them to get paid for the work that they do. And to be completely honest, I think that's one of the biggest things is all of this is drug out, or it feels like a long time, or, why is this taking so long? It's because you guys are fighting for people to get paid for everything that they did do. It's not a compromise. That's not what you guys are doing. You're trying to get to the finish line and not have to meet somewhere in the middle. So, I think that's extremely important. And whether someone is outsourcing or trying to bring, estimating in-house, there's so many variables that goes hand in hand with this. There's like, I always like to say this, there's like the category or the topic, and then there's all these subtopics that fall underneath it, right? Like there's no 1, 2, or 3. There's like 1 to 100 or something, and I think you guys answered some extremely important questions for those who, even if they outsource or they have in-house estimating, may open their eyes a lot more than what they had originally seen, and I want to thank you guys for taking the time to meet with me today and answer some of these questions. They were a little hard, some of these questions are a little hard to answer, and everybody has their own vision of doing things like you talked about, having a manual, but Tess is going to see something one way and Kevin, you're going to see something the other way. And it's just about treating people like people, I think, at the end of the day is one of the biggest things. So if you guys have any closing words, by all means, go ahead. It's been a pleasure having you guys on Ask the Expert today.
Yeah, sure. So even if you don't want to look for an outsourced company like Elkmont or even the several other remote estimating companies, we're all fighting the same fight. So we're a small niche of the industry, the remote estimating people, and it's simply this. I mean, if we can all band together and hopefully help change the industry as a whole. So even if you don't reach out or anything and you want to take this information and better use it, please do. I mean, we are here to help. We're here to educate the industry as a whole, not even just our clients. So if you want to reach out to us at Elkmont, you can visit our website or even look for us on Facebook and request a time that we can meet with you. It's great. We'll get the contact in. I'll sit down with you in a setting like this in a Zoom meeting. We'll talk through the industry, what it looks like. And again, at the end of the day, if we don't work with each other, I just want to make the industry an easier place to work with for everybody. So that's my main goal. And doing that, keeping that mindset has helped a lot of clients that aren't even Elkmont clients. And that's what makes me happy because we're fighting a big, big bear and we're every single day, we're trying to make it a better place to work in. So.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment that we're here to help, whether, you have some questions and want to use us or not. We were all incredibly passionate about the industry. I know all of us have come from many different various backgrounds, but the one thing we have in common is that we're here to help. We love this industry and we want to make it better. And so if we can band together and work together and make that happen, then it's a win in my book. So yes. Appreciate your time here, Kayla, and letting us kind of chat about what we do and what we love and how to help others.
Yeah, thank you both so much. I think you guys both said it best. Together, we all make the industry better. We help it evolve, advance, and just be the great industry that it is today. So thank you both so much for your time. And I hope to have you guys back on a future episode of Ask the Expert. Until next time, everybody, we'll see you later.